Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Talking News. So, I wanted to share an update on some of the collaborative work underway at Sight for White, particularly our growing focus on education, awareness, and accessibility and inclusion. One area we're especially pleased with is our education programme. We've been visiting local schools and delivering presentations to different year groups, helping children and young people understand visual impairment, the importance of eye care, and the equipment and technology that's available to support people living with sight loss. It was so nice to see that these sessions have been met with real curiosity and enthusiasm. The children have been really open-minded, engaged and thoughtful in their questions. And it's been genuinely encouraging to see the positive and respectful engagement. Along this, we're continuing to develop a range of inclusive and creative projects shaped by the voices of our members and community. These include accessible social activities, creative and audio-based projects, and some more adventurous ideas currently all in planning, all being designed to build confidence, connection and participation. But behind all of this is our wonderful, dedicated team of staff, volunteers, trustees and supporters across the Isle of Wight. It's their time, care and commitment to continue to drive this work forward. And it's really, really so appreciated. So thank you as always for your continued support and for being part of what we do here at Sight for White.
Here is this week's charity news, 16th of January 2026. Swimming at Medina is on Monday between 1:15 and 2 p.m. We have the whole pool, so whether you wish to swim lanes or just have gentle exercise in the pool, you will be made very welcome. The cost is £6 and transport is available, although limited. All members are very welcome to join.
Our yoga at Millbrook House has unfortunately been cancelled until April. This is due to volunteer unavailability and we apologise for any inconvenience.
Coffee and Chat is on Wednesday starting at 10 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. The cost is £2 to include drink and cakes. Staff are on hand to help with any queries and to demonstrate equipment. This Wednesday we will be joined by Simon from Southern Vectors, rearranged from last week, who will be on hand to answer any queries about VI members having issues on the local bus services. If you are a bus user and have any queries or issues but cannot make Coffee and Chat, please do not hesitate to call the office and let us know your feedback so we can speak to Simon on your behalf. Also, the hearing dogs will be popping by to talk to members about the work they do and support they offer. Please feel free to come along.
Mix and Mingle is on Thursday at Millbrook House. We have a waiting list, so if you would like to join it, please call the office.
Striders will be on Friday the 30th of January around the freshwater area. More details will be available next week.
Following on from our fundraising meeting this week, we have lots of exciting events planned. It has been decided to hold a summer fair here at Millbrook in the summer, and therefore we are asking for any items of good gifts that we can use for raffle prizes, and also any Christmas decorations for use at the events. If you are able to drop off at Millbrook, or if you are unable to come in, please call the office and we can arrange collection.
Our Easter knitting campaign is now ready and the patterns are available. So if you are able to knit or have a friend, neighbour or family member who can knit and would like to knit for us to raise valuable funds, please call and speak to Susan, who can either send out a pattern or email them to you. Our plan is for the Easter novelties to go on sale from the 1st of March.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled Concerns Raised Over Ambulance and Dental Services in Healthwatch Isle of Wight Report. Concerns about potential changes to the Isle of Wight ambulance service and access to dental care have been highlighted in a new report by Healthwatch Isle of Wight. The Watchdog's Intelligence Report, covering feedback between 13th of November and 12th of December, shows that 51% of responses were negative, 46% positive, and 3% mixed or neutral. Ambulance and dental services were the two most frequently mentioned areas. Feedback about the ambulance service was overwhelmingly negative, while comments relating to dentistry were mostly positive, though concerns were raised about access and treatment costs. The report follows concerns raised in November by ambulance staff about proposed cost-cutting changes to rotas, which they warned could affect safety, damage morale, and lead to staff leaving. Healthwatch also flagged issues around the quality of mental health crisis services, while feedback on GP services showed a marked improvement compared with the previous reporting period. One Ireland resident said the ambulance service needs more resources rather than fewer, while another raised concerns about patient dignity during an A&E visit. In contrast, positive feedback was shared about GP services, including praise for rapid responses and same-day appointments at the Esplanade GP practice in Ryde. Responding to the report, a spokesperson for NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight thanked Healthwatch for highlighting local concerns and said GP practices and pharmacies are seeing more patients than ever. They added that dental access is improving, with a new practice opening in Ryde, further contracts planned, and a mobile dental unit visiting communities across the island, alongside urgent appointments available via NHS 111. The spokesperson said more work is needed to ensure services remain sustainable while delivering high-quality care as part of the NHS's 10-year health plan.
Containers wash ashore following loss from cargo vessels off Isle of Wight. From the Island Echo, read by Lee. Shipping containers lost overboard from two vessels off the Isle of Wight during Storm Goretti have now started to wash ashore on the mainland coast, HM Coast Guard has confirmed. At 0750 hours on Tuesday morning, the 13th of January, New Haven Coast Guard rescue team responded to reports of 3 containers coming ashore at Seaford in East Sussex. Meanwhile, a container drifting off Littlehampton has been successfully recovered by a contracted salvage vessel. Additional containers have since been identified at several coastal locations, including Southsea, Eastbourne, New Haven, Rustington, Rottingdean, and Beachy Head. These units are currently being monitored with aerial surveillance ongoing. A fixed-wing HM Coast Guard aircraft was deployed on Wednesday morning to assist in locating further missing cargo. It comes after Island Echo previously reported that more than a dozen containers had gone overboard during bad weather on the 8th of January, with several located drifting at sea off the Isle of Wight. Until now, none had been confirmed as making landfall. Authorities have reiterated that the contents of the lost containers have been confirmed as non-hazardous based on cargo manifests from the 2 vessels involved. Liberian-flagged reefer vessel Lombok Strait and Cypriot-flagged cargo vessel Condor Valparaiso. Recovery of all containers remains the legal responsibility of the vessel's operators. HM Coast Guard says it's continuing to liaise with both shipping representatives and salvage crews. Sightings of containers at sea or ashore should be reported to Solent Coast Guard on 0344 382 0560 or via VHF radio. Any non-perishable wreck material that arrives on shore, including cargo, must be reported to the receiver of wreck within 28 days via the website gov.uk/report-wreck-material.
The council leader warns of real and imminent budget crisis for Isle of Wight. From the Island Echo. The leader of the Isle of Wight Council has written directly to government ministers to warn them that the island faces a serious and immediate financial challenge following the outcome of the Fair Funding Review and the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. The settlement would reduce government funding to the Isle of Wight Council by £13.4 million over the next 3 years, placing the authority in a materially worse position than comparable councils and creating what the leader describes as a real and imminent risk of being unable to set a balanced and lawful budget. Councillor Phil Jordan has today said, "I want island residents to understand that this situation has not been caused by poor management or lack of grip. The Isle of Wight Council is actually fiscally well run, operates with low debt and has already made cuts further and deeper than many other authorities. This is about a funding system that does not work for an island." The council's internal assessment shows a projected budget gap of £22.7 million in 2026 to 27, rising to £44 million by 2028 to 29. Social care alone accounts for around 60% of net expenditure, leaving very little room to absorb further cuts without affecting frontline statutory services. The leader said the Fair Funding Review fails to properly recognise the unavoidable costs of running services on a small island, including higher transport costs, limited economies of scale, workforce pressures and the additional demand created by serving millions of visitors each year. Councillor Jordan added, "Being physically separated from the mainland is not a lifestyle choice for a council, it is a permanent reality. While remoteness has been partially recognised in one area of the funding formula, it does not come close to reflecting the real costs of delivering services on the Isle of Wight. The island isn't remote at all, it's unique." Previous work with government departments has shown it costs at least £23.7 million more each year to deliver like-for-like council services on the island. That figure has now risen to around £27 million at current prices. The council is already preparing for the possibility that the settlement does not change, including identifying every achievable saving, reducing the capital programme to support day-to-day services, and preparing for an application for exceptional financial support. However, this support only provides loans, not additional funding. Councillor Jordan added, "I have to be honest with our island residents. Loans alone will not fix a structural funding problem. Without change, we risk being forced to cut essential services, including preventative work in children's and adult social care, increase our charges significantly, consider cutting statutory service scope, and withdrawing match funding and capital from vital coastal protection schemes." Councillor Jordan confirmed he is now using every available political channel alongside the Isle of Wight's MPs to secure urgent ministerial engagement. He concluded, "I will continue to fight for a fair funding deal for this island." He said island residents deserve funding that reflects the reality of island life, not a formula that overlooks it.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled "Wellow Residents Win Fight to Block Housing Plans on Countryside Land." Residents have won a fight to stop housing being built on greenfield land in Wellow after plans were thrown out by the Planning Committee on Tuesday night. 5 county councillors voted against Redmere's Development's revised outline proposal for up to 10 houses next to Wellow's main road, which last week saw a roadside demonstration against the plans. Another 5 were in favour of the application, but a refusal was sealed with a casting vote from Conservative Planning Committee Chair Warren Drew. The panel went against a planner's recommendation for conditional approval, subject to conditions and a completed Section 106 agreement, with provisions such as 35% affordable housing and a £15,000 contribution towards rights-of-way infrastructure. After a debate, reasons to reject the application were set out by Russell Chick, Planning Development Manager at the Isle of Wight Council. He said, The proposed development would result in 10 additional houses situated outside of a settlement boundary, away from services and facilities, which would result in an unsustainable form of development reliant on access by private car. The proposed dwellings and associated access and parking turning areas would be detrimental to the rural character of the area by reason of the physical and visual impact they would cause, and would therefore conflict with the intention of the local planning authority to protect the character of the area. Councillors who voted for refusal were Paul Fuller, Cowes West and Gurnard Alliance, Becca Cameron, Freshwater South, Empowering Islanders, Michael Lilly, Ryde Appley and Elmfield, Liberal Democrats, Claire Critchison, Chale, Knighton and Shorwell, Green Party and Alliance, Warren Drew, Ryde South East, Conservatives. Councillors who voted against the refusal: Ian Ward, Sandown South, Conservatives; Bill Nye, Lake North, Reform UK; Martin Oliver, Mountjoy and Shide, Conservatives; Matthew Price, Fairlea and Whippingham, Conservatives; Debbie Andre, Sandown North, Alliance. Councillor Paul Fuller said, "This is right in the middle of our countryside. It is a special part of the island. It has nothing within the proposal that to me helps to mitigate against the damage that it will have on the local landscape." Councillor Michael Lilly seconded Councillor Fuller's proposal to object and told the council chamber, "My particular thing is the pavement and the roadway. Nothing that is proposed for me will make that road safe." Councillor Becca Cameron said, "I can't consider this is generally sustainable housing. The report accepts it's not walkable to services and relies on an hourly bus." Backing the application, Councillor Ian Ward said, "I'd like to question this assumption of unsustainability. We have people who live there now, probably lived there for generations. Their children go to school, they go to work, etc." David Long spoke on behalf of the applicant earlier in the evening. "A vote negative to this application is a direct strike against a plan that you've already voted for. Where on earth, if we don't have a site that's probably inarguably in the centre of Wellow, which is a sustainable rural development, where on earth does development then go in island planning strategy terms? I also appreciate that the objectors say the site isn't sustainable. You don't need more growth, but I'm also conscious the objectors' houses are not a construct of God's own creation. They're a construct of building on some land over a period of time. This is just Wellow's next succession of change." Councillor Jonathan Hill represented Shalfleet Parish Council, which objected to the proposal, saying, "The design and scale of this development is totally inappropriate. It's an estate, suburban in form, urban in feel, entirely out of keeping with Wellow."
New 12-mile stretch of England coast path opens on the Isle of Wight from the Isle of Wight radio read by Lee. Another 12-mile stretch of the King Charles III England's coast path has officially opened on the Isle of Wight, unlocking more of the island's coastline as a national trail. The newly completed section, known as IOW3, runs from Culverdown to Binnall Bay, starting around 100 metres above sea level and taking in views across some of the island's most iconic coastal locations. The route passes through Sandown, Shanklin, Luckham, Bonchurch, Ventnor and Steep Hill Cove, combining promenade walks, countryside paths and cliff-top sections overlooking dramatic bays and coves. The opening was marked with a ribbon cutting at Flowers Brook in Ventnor, followed by a celebratory walk at Binnall Bay, organised by the Isle of Wight Ramblers Association. IOW3 begins at Culver Down with views of Sandown Bay and Whitecliff Bay before heading to Yaverland and joining the promenade through Sandown and Shanklin. The route then passes through Shanklin Old Village, continues towards Lockham and follows a temporary inland diversion around the Bonchurch landslip before returning to the coast. Walkers then pass through Ventnor, known for its sunny microclimate, before heading west through Parkland and along the promenade to Steeple Cove, ending at Binnall Bay and the southern tip of the island. The works form part of a national programme led by the Natural England to create a continuous coastal walking route around England, which will total around 2,700 miles when complete. Councillor Ed Blake, who represents the Ventnor and St Lawrence, said the new section showcases the island's natural beauty and thanked landowners for their cooperation. Graham Horton, Deputy Director for Natural England's Thames Solent team, said the path improves access to nature and helps secure the coastline as a public resource for the future. The Culver Down to Binnall Bay route is a third section of the England Coast Path to open on the Isle of Wight in recent months, following the opening of IOW5 from Chiltern Chine to Colwell Chine and a 2.8-mile stretch from Gurnard Lock and the floating bridge in September 2025.
Green Garden Waste subscription renewals open for Isle of Wight households. From Isle of Wight Radio. Households subscribed to the Isle of Wight Council's Green Garden Waste Collection Service can renew their subscriptions from Tuesday. Existing customers are being given priority to renew ahead of the new service year, which runs from the 1st of April 2026 to the 31st of March 2027. The renewal window closes on March the 10th, with the scheme opening to new subscribers from the 10th of February. The optional fortnightly service allows residents to have garden waste collected from the curbside, including grass cuttings, leaves, hedge clippings and weeds. Subscriptions cost £102 per year, with customers able to choose either a 240-litre wheeled bin or 3 reusable sacks. Residents who pay by direct debit will have their subscription renewed automatically, while those who pay annually by card have been emailed with instructions on how to go about renewing. Anyone wishing to cancel their direct debit must do so by 5 o'clock on the 3rd of March. Collected garden waste is composted locally on the Isle of Wight and turned into soil conditioner. The subscription also includes a free Christmas tree collection in January. More information and renewal details are available on the Isle of Wight Council's website.
This is the second part of the Talking News, read by Susan
and Mary.
We begin with more news items taken from the County Press and the Observer.
Tiny dog, big rescue. Flora, a 6-month miniature Dachshund puppy, has been reunited with her owners after going missing for 2 days. Drone SAR for Lost Dogs Isle of Wight and Tracker Dog Team both received calls for help after Flora ran off at around 11 a.m. at Culver Cliff following an incident with a jogger with a free-running spaniel on a narrow path. Susie Lee of Drone SAR explained, "We quickly had 2 drones in the air and volunteer searchers on the ground. It was a larger initial response than usual because of her age, the location and poor weather conditions." Throughout the following 2 days, both teams worked either in relay or in tandem, depending on what was being communicated, by using drones, tracking dogs, thermal scopes and old-fashioned legwork in bitterly cold and sometimes wet conditions. There was no joy on Saturday, but on Sunday, Flora ran straight across the path of one of the drone SAR volunteers, where he could quickly establish it was definitely Flora. A tracking dog established her direction of travel, which led to a closed holiday chalet. The owner opened the gates and a representative from each team started the gentle approach to detect if Flora was still there. It was confirmed, with the use of a thermal scope, she had bedded down under the chalet. We sent a representative forward along with companion dog Fergus on a long lead to see if Flora would respond to him. We were lucky. Little Fergus stuck his nose under the hut and Flora responded to him and some treats. She was quickly able to be secured. Flora was checked over for possible injuries and we're happy to confirm she is absolutely fine after her experience. We would like to extend our sincere thanks to everyone that reported their sightings and let us search their properties and land, particularly the staff at Whitecliff Bay, who also not only hosted our volunteers, but allowed us to use their facilities to recharge our drones. And of course, not forgetting all the volunteers from both Drone SAR for Lost Dogs and the Tracker Dog team for hours of dedicated work put in while remaining positive she would be found.
Low trust in police from abuse victims. A county press column by a police superintendent on domestic abuse has prompted an outpouring of anger and frustration from Isle of Wight residents, many of whom say their trust in the police's ability to protect victims is at an all-time low. The column, written by Superintendent Rob Mitchell, District Commander for the Isle of Wight, and published last month, set out the force's priorities around tackling violence against women and girls. But it was the public response that dominated discussion, with readers saying that police don't do enough and suggesting the column was just paying lip service. Many shared deeply personal experiences and concerns about how domestic abuse is handled locally. One woman asked whether victims who report stalking, threats and harassment to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary would finally be taken seriously, saying too many are dismissed or labelled dramatic. Another reader accused authorities of focusing only on female victims while male victims are overlooked, arguing that abuse goes both ways and should be treated equally. Several islanders described the fear and repeated violence they had endured in past relationships. One recalled hiding shoes and car keys in case she needed to flee at night, saying she once had no idea where to go or who to contact. Another said abusive and coercive behaviour had become so common in modern relationships that education in schools was now essential, calling the fear guidance on gaslighting, narcissistic traits and the warning signs of manipulation. There was also strong criticism of police response to reports of coercive control. One contributor said the most dangerous moments for a victim is when they try to leave, and stressed that officers can and should take cases forward, even without the victim's active involvement. Another said they had reported abuse for years and gathered evidence, only for nothing to be done about it by the police and Crown Prosecution Service. Others spoke more broadly about the failings. One reader described the long-term impact of mental and physical abuse as the worst thing, while others said her faith in local policing was dead after what they saw as repeated failures to protect women. Some were more sympathetic towards policing standards, pointing to underfunding and officer shortages. Although the original column outlined ongoing plans and national priorities, it was the wave of personal testimonies and the depth of public disillusionment that dominated community reaction.
Repair date confirmed for lights at Busy Junction. Drivers will have to wait until next month before traffic lights at a main road junction are fixed. Lights at Downend Road have been out of action since September after a crash damaged the control box beyond repair. Island Road said it was the second such incident in the past 20 months. Following the collision, three-way temporary lights were installed at the Hare and Hounds junction. These have contributed to longer waits for motorists and called tailbacks over the downs. After nearly 4 months, Island Roads has confirmed the lights will be up and running again next month. A spokesman said, "We are pleased to confirm that the replacement control box is due to be installed during the first week of February. We appreciate the temporary lights have been in place for a while. This is because the new control boxes had to be made specifically for this location, which extended the lead in time. We would like to thank the community for their understanding while temporary lights have been in place.
Jury finds driver 58 not guilty of careless driving. A jury has found a motorist not guilty of causing serious injury by careless driving following a collision in Newport almost 3 years ago. Richard Price, 58, of Red Lake Road in Freshwater, was acquitted at the Isle of Wight Crown Court of 1 count of careless driving after an elderly pedestrian was seriously injured in an accident on the 27th of January 2023. The charge related to a collision between an Island Roads Iveco daily van driven by Mr. Price. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, both in their 80s, was crossing the road outside Marks and Spencer's at Church Lytton. Both pedestrians were struck, with the man suffering serious injuries and being airlifted to hospital. The trial lasted 4 days. In his summing up, Judge Michael Bowles reviewed the evidence presented. The court heard Mr. Price saw the elderly couple around 6 seconds before the collision and believed they were stationary on the pavement near the crossing. Mr. Price had a green traffic light to continue around the bend. It was not disputed by either the prosecution or defence that Mr. Price was travelling at around 5 miles per hour as he approached the tight corner, a speed described in court as entirely reasonable. Judge Bowles told the jury Mr. Price said he had around 1 second to react when he realised the couple were directly in front of him, in the middle of the crossing, and he believed there was nothing he could have done to avoid the collision. The jury also heard evidence from a joint expert report prepared by collision investigation specialists. Court was told the van's A-pillar to the right of the windscreen created a blind spot, which obstructed Mr. Price's view. The report also stated the couple's clothing would have made them inconspicuous, and the angle at which they were walking may have made them difficult to spot at a quick glance. Jurors was shown a reconstruction of the collision and series of photographs showing between 6 seconds and 1 second before impact were used to demonstrate what Mr. Price could and could not have seen. The court heard Mr. Price was familiar with the area and knew pedestrians could approach the crossing from either side. Mr. Price told the court he moved slightly towards the middle of the road to avoid his back wheel clipping the pavement due to the tight lanes leading to Morrison's supermarket and Marks and Spencer's. Mr. Price said he was truly shocked and saddened by the incident and very sorry, but maintained there was nothing he could have done differently. The jury concluded the prosecution had not proved the charge of careless driving.
Staff pay and workload strike. Staff at the Isle of Wight College have been taking part in 3 days of strike action over pay, workload and long-standing funding pressures in the further education sector. Around 40 members of the University and College Union first joined the picket line outside the college in Newport on Wednesday. They will remain on strike today, Friday, with action forming part of a national dispute involving around 30 colleges across the country. UCU membership at the college has grown in recent years, with around 115 college staff now members of the union. Claire Rickson, who works in student services at the college and has been acting as picket supervisor, said the college has been understaffed for many years and that FE funding continued to lag significantly behind that of schools. She said there is a misconception about pay levels in the sector, explaining that many staff earn the minimum wage. It's been going on for years and years, but we've just got on with it, Claire said. But it's very serious for us because we know the impact on staff and students. Claire added that FE providers were still waiting for increased government funding for the sector, which she said had been promised by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. She said the college was not ignoring staff concerns, but was not offering what staff had asked for. Dr. Rob Lawrence, a teacher at the college, said some staff were working up to 60 hours a week due to job demands, without time being returned to them. The union argues that industrial action is a last resort after repeated attempts to resolve the issues through negotiation. The Isle of Wight College strikers hope that action will bring the college back to negotiating table to secure a better deal. The college said most lessons have continued as normal, and students have been encouraged to attend according to their usual timetables. During the strike days, CECAMM students in Whippingham have been based at the Newport campus, with a free minibus service operating between the two sites. Principal and CEO Ross Parker said the college has already implemented the Association of Colleges' recommended 4% pay award and remains committed to addressing workload.
Couple face £250,000 fraud charges over construction work. A husband and wife face a series of fraud charges totalling around £250,000 related to several construction companies across almost 7 years. Mark Reeves, 58, of Maybrick Road in Binstead, pleaded not guilty to 6 charges relating to running building companies for fraudulent purposes and alleged false representation to customers. The charges against Mr. Reeves relate to 3 companies: Siligo Limited, Julie Limited and Isola Building Services, and span several years. Mr. Reeves denies 3 charges dated April the 30th, 2017 and April the 1st, 2023, that the businesses were used for fraudulent purposes, namely obtaining money from customers for home improvements. It is alleged that building work was not completed within agreed timeframes, was incomplete, poorly or incompletely carried out, and that customers were not provided with written contracts setting out cancellation rights. In addition, Mr. Reeves denied 3 further counts of fraud by false representation. One charge alleges that Mr. Reeves dishonestly represented himself using someone else's Travis Perkins account for materials worth £1,000. But the materials were unrelated to the building work and instead £2,823.53 was spent. A further charge alleges he falsely represented that he would remove and correctly dispose of asbestos roof tiles using a named contractor. The final fraud charge states that Mr. Reeves claimed $36,800 was a fair, reasonable price for work at a property in Blackgang Road in Knighton, where it was said to be worth approximately £16,988. In the case against Mr. Reeves, it is alleged that there are 10 complainants with losses totalling around £250,000. As before, the court was Julie Reeves, 61, of the same address, who made no indication of plea to a charge of concealing, disguising, converting, transferring or removing criminal property between June the 6th, 2017 and September the 29th, 2022. It is alleged that Mrs. Reeves transferred money that came from her husband's alleged fraud, either with the knowledge or suspicion that it was criminal property. A trial is expected to take a couple of weeks to complete, with at least 23 prosecution witnesses alongside extensive financial documentation. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves were granted unconditional bail. A plea and trial preparation hearing was scheduled for February the 9th at the Isle of Wight Crown Court.
Police Chief defends column on domestic violence. A senior Isle of Wight police chief has acknowledged concerns raised by women over his recent County Press column on domestic violence, saying he values their feedback and is committed to listening and learning from the response. The island's district commander, Superintendent Rob Mitchell of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary, received a backlash from dozens of women to his column about plans to help domestic abuse victims published last month. They had responded to say the police response to domestic abuse is woeful. Here's how he responded. The response of County Press readers to my recent column about violence against women and girls, VAWG, is important, as this is an issue we want to encourage people to talk about and report crimes to us, he said. We know there is more to do to ensure consistently high standards across policing nationally, and we understand what is required to best support victims and survivors of VAWG. The National Centre for Violence Against Women and Girls and Public Protection supports forces with specialist knowledge and training to improve the response and tackle repeat offenders. As detailed in my column, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary is committed to a 3-year action plan to address this type of offending that can affect anyone of all genders. Overwhelmingly, it is women and girls who are disproportionately affected, as demonstrated by the Office for National Statistics data in the year ending March 2024. It revealed over 1.2 million women and over 550,000 men between the ages of 16 and 59 are estimated to have been victims of domestic abuse. One area my column didn't specifically talk about is controlling and coercive behaviour. This is an isolating and distressing crime. Anyone who thinks a friend or loved one is a victim of this type of behaviour should report it to us at the earliest opportunity so we can address it. Sometimes the victims themselves may not recognise this behaviour. It is everyone's responsibility to highlight it when they have concerns. Whether you have been subjected to domestic abuse or any of the other offences my column referenced, or indeed a friend or family member, by reporting you're taking the first step to helping keep yourself or someone else safe and accessing support. Every person deserves to be safe. Anyone who has concerns about a report they have made to us or who needs more information about how we have dealt with their investigation should speak to us directly through the officer in the case or by calling 101. See below article for the reaction to the column. To read more comments, see the original post on the County Press Facebook page.
Road to be one way for 3 months. A main road between Cowes and Newport is to become one way from the end of January, bringing nearly 3 months of traffic disruption. Southern Water is carrying out major works on Horsebridge Hill as part of the £5 million pipe replacement project. Southern Water said the upgrades will reduce emergency works and interruptions to water supply as well as helping to cut leakage. Horsebridge Hill will become one way from 9 p.m. on Sunday, January the 25th until 6 p.m. on Friday, April the 17th, or when the works have been completed. A restriction will be introduced along the road between its junction with Note Common and its junction with Nicholson Street, Newport. A similar system was in place from May the 12th to July the 5th, with brief opening for the Isle of Wight Festival. It means traffic cannot travel towards Cowes from Newport, but can in the opposite direction. The diversion route will be Forest Road, Whitehouse Road, Rolls Hill, Pallants Road. Southern Vector's buses, emergency services and vehicles engaged on highway winter maintenance operations will be exempt. Throughout the entirety of works, a temporary road closure will also be in place along Betty Haunt Lane from its junction with Forest Road for 20 metres. The closure is required for safety on the diversion route. While works are underway, the following roads will see their speed limit restricted to 30 miles per hour. Horsebridge Hill will in between its junction with Stag Lane and its junction with Partridge Road. Rolls Hill between the junction with Little Whitehouse Road and its junction with Hillis Gate Road. Hillis Gate Road from its junction with Rolls Hill to its junction with Pallants Road. Pallants Road from its junction with Hillis Gate Road to the start of the permanent 30-mile restriction. There will also be a 40-mile restriction on Whitehouse Road between its junction with Forest Road and its junction with Little Whitehouse Road and Little Whitehouse Road between its junction with Whitehouse Road and its junction with Thorness Lane. A 24-hour highway clearway order will be implemented along Pallants Road northward from its junction with Rue Street to its junction with Nodes Road, prohibiting any vehicle to wait on the carriageway. On the diversion route, the 6'6" width restriction will be revoked in a north-east direction, Thorness to northward, along Rolls Hill, Porchfield, Hillis Gate Road northward and Pallants Road northward.
Ex-chief accused of having sex on duty set to face disciplinary. The former Chief Constable of Hampshire and Isle of Wight's police is set to face a disciplinary hearing after being accused of having sex on duty and lying to senior policing figures about a sexual relationship. Scott Chilton quit in April last year after the County Press's sister paper, Daily Echo, revealed he was under investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct over the alleged relationships. Now the watchdog has confirmed Mr. Chilton will face a gross misconduct hearing in relation to 2 alleged sexual relationships while an officer, one while Chief Constable and one before he got the top job. Mr. Chilton is accused of failing to disclose, while applying to be chief, that he previously had a sexual relationship with an officer. He is also accused of having sex with an officer while on duty before becoming Chief Constable. The IOPC said he is also accused of repeatedly and dishonestly denying that relationship while he was in the role to senior figures from the Office of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police and Crime Commissioner and within the Constabulary. Lastly, Mr. Chilton is accused of abusing his position for a sexual purpose, having a sexual relationship with an officer while Chief Constable, and failed to declare this relationship. IOPC Director Derek Campbell said, "Any allegations involving officers abusing their position for a sexual purpose are taken extremely seriously. At the end of our investigation, we found evidence to indicate that the former Chief Constable's conduct may have breached the police standards of professional behaviour. We have decided that Mr. Chilton should face a disciplinary hearing. It will now be for the PCC to arrange these proceedings in due course, where a disciplinary panel will then determine, based on the evidence, whether the gross misconduct allegations are proven." The watchdog started investigating in February 2025. As reported in the Echo, an accusation was made about Mr. Chilton by another officer during their own misconduct hearing. The IOPC said Mr. Chilton, who has around 33 years in policing after joining at 18, has a case to answer for potential breaches of the police standards of professional behaviour relating to honesty and integrity, authority, respect and courtesy, orders and instructions, and discreditable conduct. Alex Boone was appointed Chief Constable for Hampshire in August last year.
Storms dump more killer plants ashore. Beachgoers are being urged to take extra care after further reports of highly poisonous plant washing up on Bembridge Beach. Bembridge Coast Guard rescue team issued the warning on Monday after hemlock water dropwort, also known as dead man's fingers, was spotted along the shoreline. The plant is considered one of the UK's most toxic species, with even a small amount proving fatal to humans and animals by attacking the nervous system. The plant's roots, which looks and smells like parsnips, is particularly dangerous. Officials believe recent stormy weather is responsible for the plant being dislodged and carried ashore. A spokesman for Bembridge Coast Guard Rescue said, "We advise people, especially those with children and pets, to stay vigilant and avoid this plant. Please take extra care when visiting the beach."
Brit-nominated singer-songwriter makes return. Brit-nominated singer-songwriter Sam Ryder, who wowed huge crowds at the Isle of Wight Festival in 2023, has been pictured at a ferry terminal ahead of a visit to the island. The chart-stopping artist travelled across the Solent on a Whitelink ferry on Wednesday, where he was quickly recognised by staff and passengers. The popular British artist was happy to stop for selfies with several admirers before beginning his visit. A Whitelink representative said, "It's been a whirlwind at Whitelink this morning, with singer Sam Ryder visiting our port on his way to the island." The Spaceman singer spoke warmly about his last Isle of Wight festival appearance with Whitelink staff, saying he enjoyed exploring the smaller stages and joining in with some karaoke during his downtime. He also commented on the clear skies and calm conditions, saying the weather looked ideal for trying out hydrofoiling during his time on the island. Sam first rose to prominence in 2020 after posting vocal covers during the UK's first COVID-19 lockdown, gaining a substantial online following. His breakthrough moment, however, came in 2022 when he represented the United Kingdom at Eurovision with Spaceman, finishing second overall. In 2023, he was nominated for Best New Artist at the Brit Awards, and since then he has gone on to release several successful singles.
New chair appointment to oversee ferry reform. A new chair has been appointed for the newly formed Cross Solent Transport Group, marking the first time the government has appointed an individual to oversee improvements on Isle of Wight ferries. The appointment of Brian Johnson was confirmed by Maritime Minister Keir Mather. Mr Johnson brings significant maritime experience to the role, having served as a Chief Executive of the UK Maritime and Coast Guard Agency between 2018 and 2022. During that time, he was responsible for overseeing maritime regulation and ensuring safety and compliance across the sector. The Cross Solent Transport Group has been established following long-standing concerns over the pricing, reliability and frequency of ferry services to and from the island. Last January, the Prime Minister acknowledged the issues during Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons, stating that Cross Solent ferry services simply have not been good enough. Richard Quigley, MP for the Isle of Wight West, welcomed the appointment and described it as a clear sign the government is taking the issue seriously after what he described as years of inaction. He said, "After tireless efforts to engage with the government and the Department for Transport, this feels like a major step forward. We cannot afford to be complacent, but appointing Brian, someone with a proven and successful track record in maritime regulations, shows that the government is listening to the island's concerns." Meanwhile, Isle of Wight East MP Joe Robertson said, "It has taken 9 long months for the government to appoint a chair of the Cross Solent Group for ferries. I look forward to finally moving forward with detailed discussions based on facts, namely that ferries have got more expensive, less frequent and less reliable. I am pleased that the government remains involved. This is the opportunity for the ferry companies to do the right thing by islanders and visitors alike. If they refuse, then the government must force their hand by creating regulations. In a video message shared with his Facebook followers, Mr. Quigley said the move may seem like a small step, but instead it was a significant one. The Cross-Solent Transport Group is expected to play a key role in shaping future discussions around ferry provision and addressing long-standing concerns raised by islanders.
Major crossings boost as ferry operator adds trips. Whitelink will introduce a significantly expanded timetable on its Yarmouth-Lymington route from April, adding hundreds of extra crossings during the busiest periods. The ferry operator said it will run a 3-boat service on days of traditionally high demand, increasing the number of sailings by 868 compared with 2025 timetable. The increase, more than 8%, is aimed at easing pressure on peak time availability and improving flexibility for regular customers, including multi-link users. All 3 White-class vessels will be deployed on the route on the busiest days, typically Fridays, Saturdays and Mondays. During peak periods, this will allow sailings every 40 minutes from both Yarmouth and Lymington. Ahead of the expanded timetable, Whitelink will complete full refurbishments of passenger lounges on each vessel by the end of March. Whitelink Chief Executive Katie Taylor said the changes follow clear feedback received from its customers. She said the increased service and investment in the fleet reflected Whitelink's commitment to the crossing and to supporting both islanders and visitors. Katie added the boosted timetable also formed part of the company's plan to grow visitor numbers to the Isle of Wight in 2026.
More specialist school places. A major expansion of specialist education on the Isle of Wight has been approved after councillors voted unanimously to increase capacity at Lionheart School, a pupil referral unit. The decision means the school will grow from 120 to 180 places from September, with additional provision for children experiencing complex high anxiety, mental health needs delivered at the former Cowes Primary School site. The move follows a statutory consultation held last year. A report to the committee highlighted a sharp and sustained rise in referrals for Section 19 education, support for children unable to attend mainstream schools due to illness, exclusion or other circumstances. Officers warn that demand is continuing to accelerate and the expansion was essential to ensure pupils can access suitable education locally. The works are expected to cost £250,000, funded through the Department for Education High Needs Capital Allocation. When full, the additional 60 places will require £1.22 million in annual revenue funding. The committee also noted a separate increase in resource provision at St Francis Catholic and Church of England Primary Academy, where places for pupils with autism and social communication difficulties will rise from 8 to 12 from September 2026. Local councillor Paul Fuller said he was very, very pleased with what he'd heard about the Lionheart School so far and was fully in support of the proposal. He wants the school to become very much a part of the community. Cowes Town Council has already expressed support for Lionheart's expansion, which the authority says will help more children have their needs met within their local community.
Someone will die. Anger over junction yellow lines. Village residents claim the installation of double yellow lines on a road and cul-de-sac have made the junction one of the most dangerous on the island. Neil Watkins, Deirdre Jones and Colin Jones from Whitwell fear someone could be killed and are calling for the lines to be removed before it's too late. Double yellows were painted on one side of Nettlecombe Lane in 2023. The Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads said they were installed following a consultation to ensure increased visibility and safe traffic flow, including pedestrians. However, residents say car parks on one side of the road, narrowing the carriageway and hampering visibility for residents pulling out of their driveways. Due to this, they say there have been several near misses. Neil said, "It is a catastrophic mess. This is probably one of the most dangerous junctions on the island." Deirdre and Peter Jones, who have lived in Nettlecombe Lane since 1978, said issues only began when the double yellow lines were painted. Deirdre said she has nearly come a cropper coming out of her drive on her Motability scooter due to poor visibility. "Someone is going to get killed or very badly hurt," she warned. Concerns were also raised over the public consultation which ran between September and October 2022. Both Island Roads and the council said usual procedures were followed, with physical notices attached at the entry points of the roads. They said details were also published online, and the next review for the area is not scheduled until 2027. The Isle of Wight council representative for the area said she has compiled a report to Highways with residents' comments ahead of the next round of consultation. She said, "I understand their frustration and I have tried to support the residents as much as possible to try to get necessary changes." Island Road said before the lines were introduced, parked cars made it difficult for vehicles to go through safely, often forcing traffic into the middle of the road. The new markings help drivers enter and exit Nettlecombe Lane while staying on the correct side, a spokesperson said. Traffic management arrangements are monitored and can be reassessed, with any changes being subject to the existing process, which involves a consultation period. However, it should be remembered that removal of the lines would lead to the reoccurrence of the safety issue originally highlighted by residents.
Suspension of fake social media account. Red Funnel has refuted inaccurate reports that it was ever on social media site Blue Sky after a series of rogue posts were made on an account purporting to be the ferry firm. Several updates went up on a now suspended account last Thursday morning. Negative in nature and poking fun at the ferry company, they were swiftly removed. An apology post followed claiming the account had been compromised. However, a spokesperson for the firm said, "At no point has Red Funnel had a Blue Sky social media account." Asked why posts going back months replicated those on other official Red Funnel channels, the spokesperson said they had been copy and pasted and were not made by an employee. A Red Funnel spokesperson said, Our official Red Funnel accounts are now fully secure and none have been hacked. These are all linked on our website and are well engaged with and followed by our customers."
Housing provider targeting tenant. A housing provider has launched legal proceedings against a former tenant following the closure of a flat linked to months of criminal activity and antisocial behaviour. The property at 4 Angelica Grove on Newport's Pan Estate was boarded up after Island magistrates granted a full closure order on December the 19th. The order, sought by the West Wight Neighbourhood Policing Team, will keep the ground floor flat shut for 3 months, following numerous reports of drug-related disorder and nuisance. It was criminal activity that left neighbours in Angelica Grove living in fear. Sovereign Network Group, SGN, which owns and manages the property, confirmed it backed the police action and helped secure the premises. SGN said it is taking the breach of tenancy extremely seriously and will decide the flat's future based on the outcome of legal proceedings. A spokesperson for the London-based company told the county press, "We're aware of the serious impact the behaviour linked to the property has had on neighbours, and we understand how distressing this situation has been for local community. We worked closely with police to support the closure order, and our teams helped secure the property at the time. We are taking the breach of this tenancy extremely seriously, and legal action is currently underway. Any decision about the future use of the property will be made in line with the outcome of these proceedings and our tenancy policies. Our priority is to keep residents safe and to work with partners, including the police, to make sure communities can live peacefully in their homes." Police said the full closure order followed repeated breaches of an earlier partial closure relating to the tenant, Rachel Hewitt. She was convicted in November last year of aiding and abetting a man to enter the address just hours after a partial closure order was served. Officers later found Hewitt inside the property with two men, one of whom was hospitalised after a drugs overdose on December the 10th. Residents reported months of misery caused by fighting, verbal abuse, dog fouling, and discarded drug paraphernalia in communal areas. Magistrates granted officers powers to arrest anyone entering the flat during the closure period.
Eligible island households to get vouchers. Eligible island households will receive extra cost of living support this winter. The Isle of Wight Council is expanding its supermarket voucher scheme, previously limited to pensioner households, to include all households in receipt of local council tax supports. Ian Lloyd, Strategic Manager for Partnerships and Support Services at the Council, said, "We know many residents are feeling the strain of rising costs, particularly following the festive season. By widening eligibility, we can ensure more households get the help they need. This is about supporting our community and making sure help reaches those who need it most." Eligible households will automatically receive a £25 supermarket voucher by post later this month. The scheme is funded by the Household Support Fund, which is designed to help ease financial pressures for low-income families during the winter. The vouchers are redeemable at Sainsbury's stores across the island and can be used to buy essential food and hygiene products. Residents are encouraged to check their eligibility and explore further support options through the Household Support Fund by visiting the Isle of Wight Council's dedicated cost of living webpage. And now we move on to Wight memories and nostalgia. Days gone by. 125 years ago in January 1901, concerns were growing for the health of Queen Victoria after her health was described as causing considerable anxiety to members of the royal family. Newport tradesmen voted in favour of a change of the early closing day in the town, following a meeting at the Guildhall presided over by George Purkis, Mayor of Newport. Shop owners and traders agreed that the early closing day should be changed from Thursday to Wednesday. The capable and entertaining abilities of a Newport man ensured that inmates at the town's workhouse enjoyed an evening of entertainment. Mr. Jones, a well-known island vocalist, organised the evening at which the inmates enjoyed listening to singing and music. The island was cut off when a fog engulfed the Solent, the fog which was described as being denser than anything seen in years.
100 years ago in January 1926, proposals for a children's playground in Sandown were rejected at a meeting of the District Council. The proposals were for a playground to be built on the old slaughterhouse site at Sandham Grounds and were to include a section of beach for free bathing.
75 years ago in January 1951, The disturbing lack of opportunities for young islanders was the main item of discussion at a Chamber of Commerce meeting held at Newport Guildhall. Despite the unemployment rate on the island standing at nearly 200, there were just 35 job vacancies. Discover Island's mystery writer.
Audrey Erskine Lindop was a prominent writer, writing over 50 novels. When she was a young girl, upon visiting the Isle of Wight, she stood outside Carisbrooke Castle and stated that she would eventually come and live on the island. Eventually she did, when she and her husband purchased a house in the village of Knighton. She was born in 1920, and it was during the 1940s that her books and her writing career took off. Her main subjects were fiction, crime, and historical. One of her most successful novels was The Way to the Lantern, centred on the French Revolution. Many of her books were made into films, such as The Singer, Not the Song, the 1961 film starring Dirk Bogarde and John Mills, I Thank a Fool, the 1962 film starring Peter Finch and Susan Hayward, and I Start Counting, the 1966 film starring Jenny Agutter. One story she often used to recount was an amusing one that involved her meeting a Mexican gentleman who advised her that if she ever wanted to visit Mexico, she could do no better than read the book The Singer, Not the Song. He then stated that the old lady who wrote the book had lived in Mexico all of her life and knew the country well. She used to joke that she did not know whether to be flattered by the fact that he appreciated her book or upset by the fact that he termed her as an old lady, and she had indeed never even visited Mexico. Being a great collector of interesting objects, it was said that she owned a fan belonging to a lady that was at the foot of the guillotine before being executed. Also, she was reputed to have in her collection Admiral Nelson's hat. Having had training as an actress, it was said she could keep people constantly amused with some of her stories.
She also went on into the realms of writing children's books. The Adventures of Wuffle the Rabbit Who Wasn't, which some critics liked, to works by writers such as Beatrice Potter and Rudyard Kipling. She was also amused by the fact that her books sold much better in other countries than in England, despite the fact that in the UK they had never received a bad review. Her career in writing began when she was only 9 years old and boarding at a convent, whereupon she was a regular contributor to a children's comic. One amusing incident took place when she decided that she would secretly make her way to London to visit a book editor, so she could read them some of her stories. In order not to upset the Mother Superior, she came upon the idea that she would make out that she had been kidnapped from her room. To do this, she took an old left shoe belonging to the gardener that he kept in the potting shed and pressed footprints from beneath her window across the garden of the convent. Following her disappearance, the police were called, but they were somewhat puzzled by the imaginative mind of the little girl who had apparently been kidnapped by a man with 2 left feet. In her innocence, she had used the one left-footed shoe to make 2 sets of prints. Her first novel at the age of 11 was rejected by the publishers. Amusingly, it was set in 1821, but as the publisher pointed out, it would understandably be rejected by the public as the whole story featured around aeroplanes. Although in her earlier life she had many failures and rejections from publishers, a prominent writer gave her some advice. He told her to write and keep on writing, which was advice that she followed. On leaving school, she started writing for the BBC on a freelance basis and then went on to join a school of dramatic art to study acting, to learn more about dialogue and dramatic writing. She eventually became employed by Gainsborough Films as a student scriptwriter at £4 a week. When she left, it was to concentrate on her novel writing, and her determination brought success. Audrey Erskine Lindop still remains one of those very successful but little-known mystery novices. She died on the Isle of Wight in 1986. And now we move on to my view.
Once in a generation. What does that mean? Once in a generation. Have you heard this phrase recently? Actually, let me jump in with the answer. You've heard it a lot. So have I. And I am fed up with it. National politicians are cringe-worthingly fond of this generation overstatement right now. Last year, in a move that surely left the nation breathless, backbenchers hailed a parliamentary discussion on playground provision as once in a generation debate. This suggested a bizarrely low bar for generational significance. If you missed this debate, would your infant children be middle-aged before Parliament mentions roundabouts again? Unlikely. Don't get me wrong, the words are often attached to extremely positive things. I'll pick out a couple of local examples. In 2025, the proposed International School of Rewilding and Regenerative Agriculture on Sandown Seafront was called A Once in a Generation Opportunity by Councillor Paddy Lightfoot. The Isle of Wight Poet Laureate programme launching this month was described by project lead Lottie Begg as a once in a generation chance to put poetry at the heart of island life. These are worthy projects indeed, but they deserve so much better. I've got beef with this phrase, and I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why. Firstly, it's vague. As a measure of time, a generation means almost nothing. With inbuilt imprecision, it could arguably be as little as a 15-year-old period or as much as a 50-year one. Generation, in this context, is taken to be the length of time between one's birth and having one's first child. Clearly, this is, at best, a ridiculously elastic timeframe by which to measure major public infrastructure projects. Secondly, it overpromises in spirit but underdelivers in reality, a double disappointment. Our news cycle demands novelty, extremes and absolutes. The real world rarely provides these. A new policy is dull, but a once-in-a-generation shift generates clicks. So the sentence announcing the best widget in a generation starts off sounding as if you're about to reveal something real and verifiable, like the best widget in the last 10 years, or even the best widget of all time. By the time we get to the end of the sentence, the hope of the speaker is that we're all so carried along with the hype that we disregard the weakening qualifier in a generation. These misdirecting words can actually make the emphasis less, not more. Yet, if they are spoken with enough conviction, it feels as if the opposite is the case. The cure is simple. We stop using this phrase or heeding it. In his 1926 work, A Dictionary of Modern English Usage, lexicographer H.W. Fowler delivers quietly scathing observations on phrases that have lost their lust through over-reliance. Fowler refers to certain overused metaphors and elegant variations as battered ornaments. I propose that we abandon the battered ornament in a generation to the graveyard of clichés. We can disregard those who use it and stretch ourselves to find new and more honest hyperbole when the need arises. And that is from Matthew Chatfield, who is the columnist.
Shouting Loud Across the Solent to Fight for Fair Deal by Phil Jordan, leader of the Isle of Wight Council. One of the questions I'm asked about most often is a simple one. Why does it feel like the Isle of Wight is always having to do more with less? The honest answer lies in how councils are funded and in a system that has not kept pace with the reality of life on an island. Local government funding was more recently meant to be guided by something called the Fair Funding Review. In theory, it should have made certain that councils get funding based on need. In practice, it simply has never worked properly for places like the Isle of Wight. We face the cost of being rural and the cost of being an island, yet the funding formula still treats us as largely as if we are neither. To put that into context, the island has a larger older population than the national average, higher health and social care pressures, and unavoidable transport costs that simply don't exist on the mainland. We have a lower economy of scale as a small unitary council. We also serve millions of visitors each year who often rely on local services. None of that is fully reflected in the current funding system. The result is a difficult position for the council. Demand for services continues to rise. Adult social care and children's services, while the money coming in does not rise at the same rate. In fact, it reduces. We are nearly 100 million worse off today than we were in 2010. That means tough decisions, careful budgeting, and sometimes saying no to things we would generally like to do. Despite this, we are not standing still. We continue to press government for a fairer deal, using clearer data and evidence to show the true cost of running services on the island. We are also working through devolution and wider reform to strengthen our voice nationally, because decisions made in Whitehall need to work for coastal and island communities too. At the same time, we are focused on what we can control, running services as efficiently as possible, protecting the most vulnerable residents, and making sure every pound we spend delivers real value. This council will always fight for the island, quietly when that works, loudly when it doesn't. I know funding systems are not the most exciting topic over the breakfast table, but they matter because behind every line of budget is a service people rely on. My own commitment is simple: to keep pushing for fairness, to be honest about the challenges we face, and to make sure the Isle of Wight's voice is heard, even if sometimes it has to be shouted a little louder across the Solent. And now we move on to what's on.
9 unmissable shows. As you begin your 2026 diary, why not book in a trip to the theatre? Whether it's comedy, music, opera, the theatre or magic, there's something for everyone at Shanklin Theatre and Medina Theatre this year. Here are 9 unmissable shows to have on your radar. Richard Jones, The Sound of Magic, Medina, February the 7th. Britain's Got Talent winning magician Richard Jones is back on the island for his now show of never-before-seen tricks that will have you puzzled. Henning Wayne, Acid Wayne, Shanklin, February 28th. Beloved German comedian Henning Wayne promises an unbiased look at climate change during his latest stand-up show. Matt Ford, Defying Calamity, Shanklin, March 5th. The political satirist and impressionist performs in his biggest tour to date, which focuses on positivity despite a divisive political landscape and his own health challenges. Madame Butterfly, Ukrainian National Opera, Shanklin, March 25th. The Dnipro Opera will take to the stage to perform the Puccini classic, accompanied by an over 30-piece live orchestra.
An evening with Jeff Stelling, Shanklin, May the 21st. The Sky Sports anchor will entertain with football anecdotes and a question and answer session looking back on over 30 years of Soccer Saturday. Fearlessly Taylor, Medina, May the 28th. The Taylor Swift tribute is back, now with songs from the life of a showgirl, which took charts by storm once again last year. Phantoms of the Opera starring G4, Shanklin, July the 14th. G4 promises a night of West End classics. The X Factor stars take to the stage on the island once again with their trademark harmonies. Codebreakers, the story of Enigma. Shanklin, September the 16th. Join Dr. Mark Baldwin in a gripping account of the Allied codebreakers who cracked the Enigma code and catalysed victory against the Axis powers in the Second World War. And finally, Tenors Unlimited, Medina, December the 6th. #1 selling classical vocal duo Paul Martin and Jem Sharples harmonise and entertain. And now, finally, we go on to the letters.
Rainfall Report by Keith Hook of Wootton Bridge. Another year's rainfall to report. After what was perceived as a dry year with a dry spring, the second half made up for it. Rainfall for the month of December being 174 millimetres. There was a total of 551 millimetres in the second half of the year, over half of the year's total. Total rainfall for 2025 was 771 millimetres compared with 1,111 millimetres for 2024 and 1,138 for 2023, a drop of 340 millimetres over the previous year. There were no calendar months without measurable rainfall.
Floaty should do what is promised. From Jock Rafferty on behalf of the Cows and East Cows Labour Party branch. On January the 22nd, the Council's Transport Committee will make a decision that will define Cows and East Cows for the next 30 years. How we replace the failed Floating Bridge 6. We cannot afford another Friday afternoon design or a budget-first compromise. The Cows and East Cows Labour Party branch is calling on the Council to ensure the specification of FB7 is built on 4 non-negotiable pillars. First, absolute availability. We need a floating bridge that does what it says on the tin. 5 return crossings an hour, every hour, regardless of the tide. Second, we need a community specification. This means proper shelter spaces for wheelchair users, families with prams and cyclists. Not an afterthought, but a design priority. Third, in 2026, it is unthinkable to build anything other than zero emission or hybrid electric vehicle. Let's make the Medina a showcase for green technology, not a graveyard for diesel engines. Finally, let's look closer to home. The island is a world leader in maritime engineering. The Council must engage with our local shipbuilding expertise right here in Cowes to ensure this bridge is built by people who actually understand our river. The people of Cowes and East Cowes have been patient long enough. It's time for a floating bridge that works for the community, not just for the Council's balance sheet.
Limit screen time for toddlers from Peter Shreve, Isle of Wight National Education Union. The latest study, led by University College London, UCL, shows higher screen use by toddlers is linked to poorer language development and higher rates of emotional and behavioural difficulties. The World Health Organization, WHO, recommends those under 1 should avoid screen time. Sedentary screen time should be no more than 1 hour for those younger than 5, further stressing less is better and the importance of a variety of appropriate physical activity. The UCL study found almost all 2-year-olds, 98%, viewed screens for an average 129 minutes a day. Only a third met the WHO recommendation of 1 hour or less a day. In summary, studies often show excessive screen time in early childhood is linked to poor language development and behaviour, especially passive screen use. Real-world interaction is key. This national birth cohort study reveals that toddlers in families facing more challenging social and economic circumstances tend to use screens more than those from advantaged backgrounds. We understand why the government will issue its first guidance on screen use for under 5s in April. Limiting screen time matters. After all, screens can display sleep, play and language-rich moments. Real-world interaction trumps passive watching, thus giving toddlers a better start.
Nostalgia Holding the Island Back by Richard Altrincham, East Cowes. We are a nation endlessly seduced by nostalgia. We polish our memories of the British seaside until they gleam, convinced that we are just cling tightly enough to the past, the future will somehow sort itself out. But nostalgia doesn't pay, and nowhere is this clearer than in the struggles facing our coastal towns. Take the Isle of Wight. My recent letter laid out why a fixed link to the Isle of Wight is becoming urgent. From the County Press, the 30th December. How the island's young people are being pushed to the margins by structural isolation, high ferry costs and a lack of year-round opportunities. It described a familiar pattern: declining youth populations, an ageing demographic, seasonal low-paid work, and a brain drain that sees those who leave rarely return. These are not the symptoms of a thriving seaside idyll. They are the predictable consequences of treating coastal communities as museum pieces rather than living economies. For decades, we've romanticised the pier, the promenade, the deck chairs and the donkey rides as if these alone could revive places facing economic and social challenges. But nostalgia cannot rebuild infrastructure. It cannot create stable employment. It cannot give young people a reason to stay. And it certainly cannot replace the reliable, affordable that modern life demands. The Isle of Wight debate shows this perfectly. Opponents of a fixed link often appeal to sentiment, the island's unique character, its specialness, its separation. But this separation now threatens the island's long-term viability. Without better connectivity, the community risks becoming unsustainable for the very generation it must needs retain. This is the wider truth for British seaside towns everywhere. We can honour our heritage without being trapped by it, but we must stop pretending that nostalgia is a strategy. It isn't. It's a comfort blanket, and one that is smothering the future. If we want coastal communities to thrive, we need bold, forward-looking investment, modern transport links, sustainable industries, cultural renewal and year-round employment. Not sepia-tinted memories, but serious plans. Until we stop clinging to the past, the British seaside will remain a symbol not of what we were, but of what we failed to become.
Impossible to Pass Group of Horses by David Gilliam of Haylands. Last Saturday, I went at about 11:30 a.m. to visit Ashley Cemetery in my car. Immediately on entering Gatehouse Lane, I came upon around 12 young ladies on horseback. They were spread all over the road, the last one wearing a tabard labelled, "Please pass wide and slow." This was impossible. They were aware of my presence, but were obstinately not going to allow me by, even when there was plenty of places they could have moved over. In fact, at one stage, the leaders of the group stopped and turned around and a group discussion was held. They held me back all the way to my destination. Doubtless, if I had sounded my horn, shouted or revved my engine, I would be accused of road rage. Please remember, courtesy is a two-way thing. You do not have a right of way to hold up others.
And so it's goodbye from Susan, Mary and
Chris. The BBC In Touch programme follows, and the scaffolding news follows that.
Hello. Later today, we meet Larchie, highly successful blind singer, producer and campaigner. She's this week's guest on an online service to encourage other would-be visually impaired musicians. We'll be chatting to her and finding out more about the service later on. But first, We want to find out more about government plans to make our roads safer and in particular, as far as In Touch is concerned, a consultation on whether to make eye testing mandatory for the over 70s when they renew their driving licence every 3 years. At the moment, self-certification that your eyesight makes you fit to drive is all that's required. Now, no one would deny that one road death is one too many, but the fact is that our roads are far safer than they were. Nearly 8,000 deaths in the mid-1960s, well under 2,000 now. And it could be argued that a continued ability to drive is one of the key ways in which older people can keep their independence and their links with the community. So we wanted to know how these plans would be administered and how to achieve the balance between keeping people off the roads who'd be a danger to themselves and others, while ensuring that people could go on driving for as long as it was safe. Lillian Greenwood is the Parliamentary Undersecretary at the Department for Transport and is overseeing the consultation that's now underway on these proposals. Minister, a general question first. Why this strategy now, particularly when driving is safer now than it's ever been?
Well, there hasn't been a road safety strategy for Great Britain for more than 10 years. Every day, there are around 4 people killed on our roads and many, many more seriously injured. We know that most of those road traffic collisions are preventable. There's a duty on us, frankly, to act to reduce the number of those casualties.
So just to look specifically at the issue of how much you can see, when someone's learning to drive, they're required to read a number plate from 20 metres. But what kind of tests will these be and who will supervise them?
Well, we're consulting on the principle of introducing these mandatory eyesight tests. And we're also interested in people's views on the logistical aspect. How often should people be tested? Should we use the existing eye test that people have? Who should conduct it? Those are all part of the consultation.
Just quoting, these measures aim to reduce deaths and injuries involving older drivers without unnecessarily restricting their mobility and personal freedom. How would you propose to achieve those two things simultaneously, because they could be regarded as mutually exclusive?
Well, look, we know that we've got an ageing population and that more people are driving into their later years. And we know that, that's a really important part of keeping people involved in society, keeping their independence. I understand how important driving is to people. And older drivers who are fit to drive and have good enough vision, including, by wearing glasses where they need to, they should have nothing to worry about from this announcement. But the truth is that if someone can't see well enough to drive, whatever age they are, we want them not to be driving, because that's good for their safety and it's good for the safety of other road users. And we've seen some really tragic cases where someone with poor eyesight or someone who's driving when they shouldn't be driving because their eyesight has deteriorated have continued to drive, and that's resulted in fatal collisions, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Stay with us, Minister. I want to bring in Jessica Kirby. She's Director of Services at the Macular Society. Jessica, what are you hearing from service users?
We're getting a lot of calls around driving, and in fact we always do. Driving's one of the most often raised subjects on our helpline, and it's very emotionally charged. It's such a big symbol of independence and identity. Some people are really welcoming clearer guidance and the regular checks, and other people are concerned, of course, about what those proposals could mean for future independence, and especially if that's when decisions are feeling perhaps automatic or not individualised, taking into account different people's circumstances.
Because generally people with macular disease are older and so may fall under this new system. How concerned are you about people losing their independence?
Well, lots of people, of course, with AMD are older, but we support people throughout their entire life. People's sight can deteriorate at any age, and that's why we really encourage people, whether or not you've got a diagnosed eye condition, to get regular sight tests, especially when sometimes changes to vision can be quite gradual and it can sort of sneak up on you a bit. It might not be that easy to notice small changes that happen very gradually over a long period of time. So we would encourage people to get site test anyway.
Well, I think this is a point that Dr. Peter Hampson would agree with. He's Clinical and Policy Director at the Association of Optometrists. Peter, I think you're in favour of the proposals in general, but you do have concerns. What are they?
We think it's about making certain that the service is delivered via an optometry setting, hopefully, so that we can give solutions and not just bad news. You can think of examples with patients with cataracts seen in perhaps a standalone setting. They may just be told they don't meet the standard. Seen in a supportive setting, they can be told what they have, how it can be fixed, and how they can get back to making certain they can continue to drive safely.
Could this not be a good thing in the long run, in that it will make it necessary for people to have eye examinations who might otherwise have put it off, and therefore maybe make treatment available before it otherwise would have been?
Absolutely. Picking up most eye diseases early is the key. Glaucoma particularly being one of perhaps the most pressing conditions that can stop people driving because of the loss of peripheral vision. Catching it early, they can be stabilised, they can be prevented from progressing in many instances, and we can keep people driving safely. It's really about the public awareness of embedding those sort of good eye health habits of going regularly. That makes a huge difference. But we are a little bit nervous if a standalone solution happens, that some patients might perceive that because they've been told they meet the standard, that their eye health is okay, and that won't necessarily be true. And we think the sort of a more all-encompassing solution is probably going to be better for the public, better for patients, and better for eye health generally.
I will ask the Minister about that in a moment, but, on the other side of this, could there be a risk of people deciding not to attend eye tests for the very fear of losing their licence and thus not getting the treatment they may need if an eye condition is discovered?
I think it's a risk, yeah, absolutely. If it's a mandation that people have to go, then we hope that would be prevented, because people will have to attend to make certain they can continue to drive. But we certainly wouldn't want people to put off attending for the reasons we've said about detecting disease and keeping people healthy rather than waiting until it's too late.
Minister, given that eyesight problems often do develop gradually and can occur at any time, isn't there an argument for making a proper eye test an integral part of the driving test for everyone and at points of, licence renewal?
Well, I absolutely recognise that there are arguments for that, and I'm sure it's something that we'll reflect on when we receive the responses to our consultation. Obviously, there's always a balance to be struck in policy about what's appropriate, what's achievable. And we know that eyesight deteriorates as we get older, so we do have to think about where we target resources. But I would encourage everyone to get regular eye tests, but particularly if you're a driver, because we do want people to stay safe on the roads. And I do recognise that people don't always appreciate that their eyesight is deteriorating. Our brains are amazing things, and they quite often fill in blanks that aren't there.
And what about Dr. Hampson's specific concern that these tests may not be overseen by a professional who would have the chance to put it in context?
Well, I think my reassurance would be that I think Dr. Hampson makes a really important point, and that's one that we will reflect on as we take these proposals forward.
Just finally, what's the timescale on the consultation and who will be involved?
So the consultations close at the end of March. We want to hear views from professionals who work in eye health. We want to hear from individuals who are listening to this programme. We want to hear from families who've been through this experience. Everyone's views are welcome, and can go online onto gov.uk and find further details of the consultations, and I'd encourage them to let us know their views and ideas.
And Peter Hampson, how reassured are you, particularly on that point that you made quite strongly, that you wanted medical specialists to be involved in this process?
I think the intentions are clear that this is about trying to do the right thing, and we welcome that. For us, it's really about making certain that this delivers a good value system, not just the cheapest sort of system that can be implemented. Now, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like that's certainly the intention. Obviously, we will be responding to the consultation and making those points, which I think I would encourage everybody else to do as well.
Dr. Peter Hampson, Jessica Kirby and Minister Lillian Greenwood, thank you all very much indeed. Now, it may well be a myth that there is some intrinsic link between blindness and music, contributed to by superstars like Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, jazz pianist George Shearing. I could go on. But the fact is that while we may not all be superstars, there are considerable numbers of visually impaired people who do have the potential to make their mark in the music business, but still struggle to find a way in. And it's to help people like this that the project Sounds Without Sight was set up. The idea is to gather and curate information about all aspects of the industry, not just performance, but production, software and hardware, developments in assistive technology. And also to provide opportunities to question those who've already made it. Well, we'll have a great example of that in a moment. But first, we're joined by Jay Pocknell, who's the project leader of Sound Without Sight. Jay, tell us a bit more about it. What's the basic aim?
It broadly stemmed from my own experience of being a partially sighted person who wanted to work in the mainstream music industry on records that were making it into the charts. And I did accomplish that. But I think at that time, I was aware that I found it quite difficult to disclose my own vision impairment. And I also came up against probably more access barriers than I was expecting in the industry when I got to that level. And I guess I refused to believe that I was the only person with vision impairment working in music or wanting to work in music. But I just didn't know how to find others or access any specialist advice. So I guess where we believe we can have the biggest impact is showcasing the good work of people who are doing really well in terms of their particular niche within music or sound, so experts within the field. So we do that through our monthly events, and we also have our online knowledge hub which collates all of those solutions. What we really want to be is that one front door for all information that's relevant. What we really try to provide is that space to create community so that when someone comes with a specific question, there's going to be someone that's got useful advice on that particular thing.
Right, well, let's talk about that specifically, because one of the services the project provides is setting up online sessions, including the chance to ask questions, as you say, of people who've made it. We were delighted to have Larchi as a guest on a music special about visually impaired musicians a couple of years ago, and it's great to have you back today. Welcome, Larchi.
Hey, hi.
So, in a nutshell, tell us your own story, really. I mean, how did you get into the business?
I came into music when I was super duper young. You know, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, so I took to my piano, I took to my writing, and that was how the world understood me and I understood the world. And, you know, for a long time, I tried to be sighted passing. I tried to downplay my blindness and my neurodivergences. But then I realized that if I wanted to do my best, I was going to have to be accommodated. So I started to advocate for myself to just do well in the studio. I started using my cane, and as I got more and more confident and got more and more gigs, I was like being invited to really cool fancy galas. So I was like, my cane needs to match my dresses. So I started glamming up my canes, and eventually I joined the Recording Academy, and I asked them, what are you doing for accessibility and disability inclusion? And they were like, well, you're the first person to ask us that. So that turned into me eventually building an organization called RAMPed, Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities, to be able to give opportunities to more folks like myself, because I figured I was masking.
Yeah.
And I thought, other people have to be masking also. So a lot of folks, they think of disability or they think of blindness and they think, oh, you poor thing, right? And I wanted to break that stigma by letting people see someone who is successful, but not just me, to see them in all different shapes, sizes, creeds, and talents out in the music industry.
Well, as Jay was saying, part of the idea of this project is to give people the opportunity to put questions to people like you. And someone who might find that information useful is 18-year-old Oscar King, currently a student at Royal National College in Hereford, which runs specialist courses for visually impaired students. Oscar, first of all, just tell us about the music course you're on and what your ambitions are.
So the course I do, it kind of covers all aspects of music production, media. At the current minute, I'm doing an assignment where I'm having to put together a track. I have to record each instrument and then I kind of put them into a digital format where I'll compose it and compile it together. But there's a lot that goes into it. You know, it's everything from kind of setting up microphones to learning how to use a sound desk. It's all very high tech, and
I was going to say, it sounds far too complicated for me. What interests me is what do you actually want to do? Because it's not directly to be a performer in your case, I think.
No, because I kind of fell in love with music through film and through TV, and I realised that my passion was kind of sparked by how do they create this mood in this film and in this scene, why do they use this? And I realised it all began with that. And then through a lot of research and kind of Googling and things, I kind of found out what job role it was, and I realised I wanted to be a music supervisor.
Right, so Larchie, there you are. He wants to be a music supervisor. Oscar, if you've got a direct question you'd like to put to Larchie, put it, by all means.
I was wondering if there's one thing that going into this industry and, you know, even in music supervision or whatever job it may be, if there's one kind of key thing to keep in the back of your mind, what would it be?
Be good.
I like
really,
that. Be
really good.
You mean
Just
good
be
at
great
your
at what-
not just be good, be good
well,
at
be
your
a good
job.
person. Everybody should be a good person. But I mean, just be really, really great at what you do. Be undeniable. You know, I see a lot of times, especially at Ramped, and by the way, join Ramped, ramped.org. rampd.org. We have tons of supervisors, tons of music producers and professionals. But at the end of the day, you know, there are some people that will say, oh, I don't want people to just, you know, hire me because I'm blind and because they felt sorry. And then on the other side, there are folks who go, oh my gosh, I'm blind, hire me. It's just all about like the disability. But if you are really, really good, then you have the freedom to talk about your blindness if you want, or to not talk about your blindness if you want. You get to be confident enough at what you do to know that someone hired you for your skill, which allows you to advocate for yourself, which allows you to do what you love at your best. And then there's no question about it. And also continue to hone your craft. It doesn't just end at getting the job. It doesn't just end at folks knowing and recognizing who you are, whether you're blind or not.
No pressure then, Oscar. No pressure.
No pressure then, Oscar. None at all. None at all.
I want to bring Jay back quickly because, Jay, just tell us a bit more about this week's Q&A session with Larchie and, you know, how people can take part.
So our monthly meetup sessions, we've been running for about a year now, and the whole point of those is to A, showcase professionals and insight into their career pathways, and B, demonstrate new accessible audio music technology. So this Thursday, obviously, we're very much focusing on the first of those. So we've got Larchie, very excited to have Larchie as our main guest. And you can sign up now at soundwithoutsight.org, and then there's a button for monthly meetups. It is Thursday evening, 7 o'clock. It takes place on Zoom.
Well, Jay Pocknell, Larchie, Oscar King, thank you all very much indeed. And that's it for today. As usual, we're keen to hear from you. Send us your comments, your queries to intouch@bbc.co.uk or leave us a voice message on 0161 836 1338. From me, Peter White, producer Beth Hemmings, goodbye.
Scaffolding and Skips News, week commencing the 12th of January 2026. Newport area, 15 to 16 Key Street. Newport area skips, 26 Red Fox Square.
Ryde area, 141 High Street, Nationwide Building Society, 3 St Thomas's Square.
Cowes area, the Portland Inn, Worsley Road, Gurnard, and Carville Court, Terminus Road. Cowes area skips, 69A Pelham Road.
Ventnor area, Old Town Hall Court, Albert Street. Ventnor area skips, 68 Leeson Road, 1 Sydenham House, Hamborough Road.
Sandown area, 52 Fitzroy Street.
Brading area skips, 6 Nicholas Close.